Hi, welcome to the series of beginning clarinet videos from Murray State University. My name is Dr. Amy McCann. I'm the clarinet professor here, and I'm really excited to get you started and help you on your way to becoming a wonderful clarinet player. So the very first thing we have to talk about is how you put the instrument together and how you care for it while you're playing it and after you're done playing it. So the first thing you want to do is sit down in your chair, make sure that you have a nice flat surface here to work on. So put your case in your lap. Everybody's cases are going to look a little bit different depending on what brand instrument you have or how old it is. But for the most part, all of them have some sort of clasps that look something like this. And you want to make sure that the clasps are facing the right direction so that you don't open the case upside down. You want to make sure that you're opening right side up so that when you do open it, the clarinet pieces stay in the case the way they're supposed to instead of spilling out accidentally. So once you've determined that you've got it right side up, if you think you're going to forget, put a sticker on your case so you know which side is up. So we're going to open up the clasps and open up the case. And again, depending on what brand clarinet you have or how old it is, your case might look a little bit different from mine in terms of where things go in the case. But you should have all the right pieces, and you should put some other things in there too. So you want to make sure that in addition to your clarinet, you want to have all the pieces, which we'll go over in a second. You also want to make sure that you have a clarinet swab to clean it out after you're done. You always want to make sure that you have some cork grease in there, which usually comes in this sort of chapstick looking tube. You want to make sure, for your band director's sake, that you always have a pencil, a sharpened pencil. This one's getting kind of dull, but it would still write. And you need to make sure that you have a reed case. Now I will tell you that when you buy reeds, they come in these little plastic sleeves, which is fine for getting them to you and getting them delivered in the box. But once you're actually using them to play the instrument, you want to make sure that you put them in a different kind of reed case and one that takes care of them a little bit better. These plastic sleeves keep them from getting broken in transit, but if you're actually using them as clarinet reeds, these cases are not great. I have a super fancy D'Addario case. You don't have to go quite this nuts on a reed case. You can get other ones smaller ones from music stores. But what you want to look for is you want to make sure that the surface on which they sit has little grooves carved into it. So the backs of the reeds, this is your reed, by the way, you want to make sure that the back of the reed always stays nice and flat. So in order to do that, you have to have a flat surface, but there need to be grooves cut into it so that when you're done using the reed and you put it back in there, it can dry properly between uses. So it doesn't have to be a super fancy reed case, but it needs to be, where is it? It needs to be better than these guys, for sure. And you need to make sure that you always have more than one functional reed in your case. As soon as it's chipped or cracked or starts to look or smell funky, get rid of it. You need to make sure that you always have more than one because reeds can get broken easily. And if you're in rehearsal and you put your reed on the wrong way and you accidentally chip it, you need to have a backup. In fact, it would be better if you had 4 playable reeds in your case at all times so that if something happens, or if the reed that was good yesterday just isn't as good today and you need something good to play on, you can rotate them around a little bit. So make sure you always have more than one. 4 is a good number to shoot for. All right, so let's get to the business that you all are excited to get to and putting it together. So we talked about cork grease, right? At the ends of a lot of the joints here, you're gonna have a little bit of cork. There's 2 on this one, there's 1 on this one, and there's 1 cork on the bottom of your mouthpiece. Putting a little bit of cork grease on it will help you put your instrument together more easily, but you don't want to over grease. You don't want it to be so easily fit together that it can also easily fall apart. Especially if you're holding onto one part of your clarinet, you don't want the whole bottom half to just slip off because it's over greased. So what you need to do is take your cork grease and just put a little bit on and then just twist it around. Yes, you'll get cork grease on your fingers. It's fine, it's not gonna hurt you. You don't need to put a lot on, you don't need to keep wringing it around. You just put a little dot on there and give it a little wipe to get it around the rest of the corks. And you wanna do that to each of the corks. You do not need to do this every time. If your clarinet is brand new, it's gonna need grease more often because the corks are new and they're dry. If your clarinet is not brand new, or if you've been playing for a while, you'll need to do it less because the corks kind of retain this lubrication in there. So you'll know when you need to grease it a little bit more when it feels too hard to put together. It should be comfortably tight, it should be snug, the pieces when they fit together, but you shouldn't have to incredible hulk it together. It should slide together relatively easily. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is put it together And we're gonna build from bottom to top. So if you think about what you know about what an assembled clarinet looks like, this goes at the very bottom. This, as you will be very surprised to figure out, is called the bell, because it looks like one. So we start with the bell in either hand, doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed, and then you wanna put the lower joint on first. So the lower joint is the one that has all these long, skinny keys with this big pad cups on the sides. The upper joint doesn't have the same kind of long, skinny keys, and all of the little pad cups are smaller. This is the upper joint, this is the lower joint. So you start with the bell, and then you put the bottom of the lower joint into the bell. You want to hold this carefully so that you're not bending the keys. If you squeeze too hard and twist, you might accidentally bend these keys. So hold it gently and just use little twists. Little twists. Don't ever force a clarinet to go together or come apart. Little twists, gentle push, and you've got the first part of your clarinet together. So the next part, we've got the bell, the lower joint. Now we got to do the upper joint, but we have to be really careful, because if you look at the bottom of the upper joint here, there's this little key that's hanging off right over the cork. That's called the bridge key. And that's part one. Part two of the bridge key is this little piece over here at the top of the lower joint. And these two need to overlap. This one goes underneath, this one goes over top of this. So we need to make sure that they overlap when we put it together, but we don't want them to knock into each other when we're putting the clarinet together. So on the upper joint, this little ring and that little pad right there, you need to make sure that when you put it together, you're holding it down. You don't need to squeeze real hard, you just need to make sure that it's pressed so that these guys meet the body of the instrument. And if you look what happens, when I press those down, the top of the bridge key goes up. So we want to make sure that the bridge key is up so that it can fit over its little buddy down here on the lower joint. So with these two down, again, put them together, little twists, gentle pressure, and you want to make sure that the bridge key is lined up. Usually there's a little sort of rectangular shape that you can sort of meet up here. So make sure it's lined up in a straight line right here. The part from the lower joint is underneath the part from the upper joint. You gotta kind of look under there, but it should be nice and lined up. And then if you look at the clarinet from the front, all of these holes are in a straight line so that your fingers can reach them easily when you're playing. So then the very next part that goes up here is this little guy. It's called the barrel. Again, looks like a barrel. That's what it's called, just like the bell looks like a bell, and that's what it's called. And if you look, the barrel is skinnier at one end and a little bit bigger at the other end. The fatter end goes at the bottom, the skinnier end goes on the top. If you try to put it together this way, it's not gonna fit. But if you put the larger end at the bottom, and again, gentle pressure, just slide right on. And the last piece is the mouthpiece. Now, the mouthpiece usually has a bunch of stuff all together, right? This by itself is the mouthpiece. And when you're storing things in a case, you should also have a ligature that goes on top and a mouthpiece cap. Now, the mouthpiece cap should come with a ligature. When you buy a ligature, you get a mouthpiece cap. These are the things that are gonna get lost, right? So if you have an instrument that maybe belonged to a family member or a sibling or something, this might be gone. You can pick up another one from a music store, and they usually fit over most ligatures. Also, your ligature might not look like mine. There's lots of different brands, there's lots of different kinds. It's okay, you just need something that holds on the reed. There are better ones and there are worse ones, but for now, you just need something. So take the ligature and the mouthpiece cap and put them aside for just a second and just look at the mouthpiece. When you're holding the mouthpiece, please always be very careful. Mouthpieces are super fragile. All of the plastic or hard rubber up here is very thin and it can be chipped or shattered very easily. And mouthpieces, because they're small and wedge shaped, are very easy to drop and to fumble, which is why part of the reason why I want you to sit while you're putting your instrument together. So always hold the mouthpiece over the case. That way if you drop it, it falls back into the case, not onto the floor where it could get chipped and shattered. So we're gonna hold the clarinet upright. We're gonna securely hold the mouthpiece in one hand, and you wanna make sure that this flat part called the table and the window are facing the back of the instrument. So we wanna line up the table and the window of the mouthpiece with this little exclamation point looking key right here. It's called the register key, and there's a thumb hole, but it looks kind of like an exclamation point. So you wanna put it on, again, little twists, gentle pressure. But you can twist it around until this makes a straight line with the register key. So you've got the window and the table lined up with the register key and the thumb hole. And then you can pop the ligature on You put the mouthpiece cap. The mouthpiece cap is there to protect your mouthpiece. So while you're not playing, if you have to get up and walk around, you won't accidentally, if you accidentally knock this into something, it's not going to chip the mouthpiece. It also means you won't chip the reed, but reeds are less expensive to replace than a mouthpiece is. So the clarinet, for the most part, is assembled. There's still one piece missing, but we're almost there. So then you want to make sure you shut your case, close the latches, put it down on the floor next to you, or tuck it under your chair. The next thing we need to do is put on the reed. So I'm going to take a reed out of my reed case here. I'm going to use this one today. Now, you don't ever want to play a clarinet reed dry. That just feels awful and not good. So when you take the reed out, you pop it in your mouth to wet it a little bit. You take the mouthpiece cap off, put it on the stand. So you want to soak the reed for 30 seconds to a minute or something. The reed, because it's small and delicate, is always the last thing on and the first thing off. We've already assembled the entire clarinet. The ligature is even waiting for us here. The last thing we're going to put on is the reed. When we reverse this process and put everything away, it's going to be the first thing off. I did just say a minute ago that reeds are inexpensive to replace and not hard to replace, but that doesn't mean you want to do it more often than you have to. So once it's nice and moist, move the ligature up just a little bit, but then take the thicker end of the reed and slide it down into the ligature so that it's lined up over the table and the window, right? If we go the other way, we might chip it. So we always want to make sure that we're sliding the thick end of the reed down into the ligature. Now you can use some combination of your fingers and your thumbs to line up the reed. You want to make sure that the curve at the top of the reed is just below the curve of the top of the mouthpiece. You should see just a hair's width of that black mouthpiece sticking over the top of the reed, but just a teeny tiny bit. And you also want to make sure that it's centered over that window on that table. So make it match the shape of the mouthpiece with just a teeny tiny bit of mouthpiece sticking out over the top. So we want to make sure that that's there, and then we slide the ligature down just a little bit. The ligature should be low enough that you see the end of the shaved part of the reed. This is called the vamp. The cut part of the reed is called the vamp. We want to make sure the ligature is down below it. If it's up too high, it's going to stop your reed from being able to vibrate, which is how the clarinet makes sound. So we don't want to stop the clarinet from making sound. And if you notice what I did when I slid it down into place, I then took the screw and I tightened it a little bit. Your ligature might have 2 screws. Your ligature might only have 1. Ligatures are always made to be right-handed. Even if you are not right-handed, the screws should always go on the right hand of the mouthpiece as you are looking at it. So you should have the register key and the flat part of the mouthpiece facing you, and the ligature screws should be in your right side, not your left side. Also, your ligature might fit so that the screws are on the underside, so the screws are on the same side as the reed. As long as they're on the right-hand side, then you've put your ligature on correctly. The screws should be on the right, whether they're on the top or the bottom of the mouthpiece. Neither one is wrong. It just depends on how your ligature is built. So later videos in this series, we'll talk about how to form an embouchure and how to play and posture and hand position. So I'm going to skip over that part now. And we're going to pretend that we are almost done playing, right? Now, sometimes when we're playing, our case is not where we are. We had to go put our instrument together off stage and walk on stage, and then we have to walk off stage to put our instruments away. You have to be careful with how you walk with the clarinet. First of all, when you're not playing and you're moving around, put that mouthpiece cap on top so that you don't chip the mouthpiece and so that you don't chip the reed. But like I said, mouthpieces are more expensive and harder to replace. Reeds, you should have spares in your case as you go. So when you are moving around with the clarinet, and you are not playing it, you want to make sure that you're always holding it parallel to your torso, which means hold it in one hand and keep it kind of close to your body. That way, if you don't run into anything, it won't run into anything. You don't want to hold it like this because you could run into things on either side, or people could run into you on either side. You also don't want to hold it mouthpiece down. You always want to hold it mouthpiece up as if you were playing, right? So you can hold the bell and hold it against your body. You can hold it this way, but make sure you keep it parallel with your torso and close to you to keep it safe. A lot of this keywork can be easily bent, especially if there's a lot of people moving on and off stage. You don't want to bump into each other and get caught on things. So keep your clarinet close to you. Hold it in the middle. That's fine. Again, if you hold it here and you've overgreased your instrument, this stuff might fall off. We don't want that. If you need to get up and move away from your clarinet and leave it where you're sitting, There are certain things you should not do. This right here in front of me is a music stand, not a clarinet stand. Please do not put your clarinet on the stand here. We all know that in any given band room, anywhere in the US, there are those stands where as soon as you touch them, they go flat and everything falls off. Why would you put your clarinet on that? You don't want to do that. Also, as tempting as it is, the bell does sort of suggest that maybe it can stand like that. You don't want to leave your clarinet unattended on the floor just sitting on the bell. The bell is not wide enough to hold it up, and if a strong breeze comes through your band room, it's going to tip over. And if it tips over, keys are going to get bent, mouthpieces can get shattered. We don't want to do that. Now, some of you may choose to buy a small clarinet stand. It's got 4 legs that make the base a little bit wider and therefore a little bit sturdier. So you can put that on the floor and then safely put your clarinet on it, and then it's okay. Then it's a hands-free device. But don't ever just leave your clarinet alone on the floor like this. It is not sturdy enough to stand up on its own. Another thing you can do if you don't have a clarinet stand is leave it on the chair behind you. Now, you can leave it like that, but then you got to be careful. If people are walking by your chair, they may hit either end that's hanging off. So then you can take it apart in the middle, but remember, we got to be careful about that bridge key, right? So you got to hold down this ring and pad right here, give it a gentle twist, take it apart in the middle, and then you can put the 2 halves on your chair, and then it can safely be there for as long as you need it to be there while you're gone. And then when you come back, just put it together and you're ready to play again. I'm holding down the bridge key and I'm lining things up. So please be careful about how you carry your clarinet around. You don't want to break things just because you accidentally ran into something while you were walking with your instrument. All right, so let's say we've finished rehearsal. Now it's time to put things away. So we're going to make sure, once again, we have our case flat on our lap so it's not sliding off and we're not spilling things everywhere. It's still right side up so that none of the things that we've got in the storage case fall out. So then, if you remember, I said something was the last thing on and the first thing off. Yes, it's the reed. In order to get to the reed, I do have to take the mouthpiece cap off first. But then you just unscrew the ligature and loosen it a little bit, and you can even take it all the way off. Just take it straight off the top, take your reed off, and then I like to lay my clarinet across the case gently so that my hands can be free while I'm putting the reed carefully back in its case so it can dry out on its grooved surface there. And then what you want to do is just take the mouthpiece off. So give it a little twist and a little pull, and it comes right off. Again, I'm putting my clarinet down on the case so I can use both hands. And put your ligature back on, cover it with the mouthpiece cap, put it in its slot in your case. Then you've got a clarinet with just the barrel at the top. This is when you want to swab it out. You don't want to pull the swab through the mouthpiece because it will wear down the inside of the mouthpiece and it'll change the shape, and then the mouthpiece won't play as well as it used to. You can maybe pull the swab through the mouthpiece once a month, but if you do, you have to do it very, very carefully. So the way swabs work is this one is silk. Silk is actually really nice. They're not that expensive. I know silk sounds like it would be expensive. It's not. Silk is very absorbent, but it also squishes down to a really small diameter, so there's less of a chance of it getting caught on the inside of any part of your instrument. And then on the other end, there's some sort of little weight that helps you drop it through. So once a month, when you get to swab your mouthpiece, you always drop it through the big end. So you drop it through here, and then it's going to come out the window. And when you pull it through the window, you want to pull it away. You do not want to pull this over the tip because it's going to wear that tip down, and then the mouthpiece is not going to play very well. So you want to pull it gently and slowly out the window and not anywhere near the tip at all. You can do this every once in a while. You do not want to do this every time because, like I said, it will change the dimensions of the inside of the mouthpiece. Just like the Grand Canyon was formed by the river running through it over hundreds of years, you will wear down the inside of your mouthpiece and you will change the shape of its landscape if you pull the swab through it too often. If you need to clean it, you can soak it in warm water, a mixture of warm water and vinegar. Just soak it in a cup, tip down, but leave the cork out. Don't get the cork wet. Leave that out and gently soak it. Don't drop it into the glass because, again, we don't want to crack the tip. But if you just put it gently, warm water and vinegar will help clean and disinfect it. That's all you need. So we're going to put the mouthpiece and the cap back together. And now we're going to swab out the entire rest of the instrument. This you can do all at once. You don't have to do individual pieces. I like to start from the bell and drop it down. It's a little bit easier to drop the weight in the bell. It's a little bit of a larger target. You make sure you feed it through until it drops through the other end, and then you just pull it gently. And do this a couple of times. As you're playing, condensation is going to form on the inside of the instrument, and you want to make sure that you clean as much of it out as you can so that it doesn't sit and get in all the pads and the body of the instrument as you go. So, you know, 3 times or so should work. Pull it through. Then you can put your swab back in your case. And then we got to reverse the process that we did when we assembled it. So we're going to start by taking the barrel off the upper joint. So hold the upper joint gently. Again, you don't want to squeeze so hard that you bend the keys, but hold it gently and just little twists and a gentle pull, and it'll come right off. And you can put the barrel where it goes in your case. Yours might lay down or stand up, just depends on what kind of case you have. Then we're going to take apart the upper joint and the lower joint, but again, we have to be careful of this bridge key. So we're going to hold down this key right here so the bridge key pops up. And we're going to be careful not to squeeze too hard any of the key work, and just little twists, gentle pull, and it's apart. And then the last thing is the lower joint and the bell. So again, hold it gently so you're not bending any keys. Little twists, gentle pull, put the bell away, put the upper joint away, close the case, and you're ready to go. So hope you stay tuned for the other videos about all the other aspects of beginning to play the clarinet. I promise you will get to actually play in a couple of videos, and it's going to be super fun. So I'll see you then.